record. And you know, Benny, I think I'll make you the co-host so that when I share my screen, I can't see some of the other things that go on. So if folks enter the waiting room, maybe you could let them in if I don't get that message. All right. So welcome again to our introduction to cooperative entrepreneurship. It's a 1.5 hour training, and we won't have a time for a break or what, so we'll pretty much like power right through it. There's a lot to cover, and we're really just going to scratch the surface of this. But if you have any questions, we will stop and are happy to answer your questions. So this event is sponsored by the Southeast Center for Cooperative Development. Benny and I are co-founders and co-directors of the center. We have a website that you can check out more resources and learn more about the work we do at www.coopsnow.org, and co-ops are hyphenated. We also have a Facebook page. It's under at Organizing the New Economy. And oops, sorry. So we wanted to start out by introducing ourselves really briefly, and then we'll hear from you and get to know why you're here and what your interests are. So Benny, would you like to start us off and tell us what brought you to this work?
Sure. My name is Benny Overton. It says here that I'm president of UAW. I'm retired president of the UAW. I retired a couple of years ago. I was formerly with NOAA, and it was actually through my work with the UAW as a union officer and my work with NOAA that led me to co-ops. With the UAW, I was with UAW Ford at Ford glass plant. And it was a plant that made windshields and automotive glass for Ford Motor Company. And we had the challenge of returning to profitability this plant. It was grossly profitable at one time, but of course, when you are a supplier to one large buyer, the buyer can dictate the prices, and basically Ford dictated the prices they would pay for windshields. I think at the time they were paying probably between $35 and $50 per windshield, which really hurt our profitability because prior to that, we were just grossly profitable. Anyway, we were faced with the challenge of returning to profitability. Actually, Ford wanted to get out of the glass business, and they were threatening to either shut us down or sell us unless we return to profitability. And so I and a group of other guys got together and I guess challenged the management team at Ford to give us an opportunity to have greater input into the management of the plant. And we had said that we thought we could return it to profitability. Anyway, we ended up having a joint management arrangement. And I was part of the team that developed from wall to wall self-directed work groups. And it was developing these work groups that were had full authority to make decisions about the operations there on the floor. But it was my experience with that really just, it really blew me away. When you see the transformation that I experienced in some of the workers, I mean, some of the most cynical workers, some of the most critical workers there at the plant actually became some of the most involved, participative, and really fully contributing of all the employees we had there. To witness that transformation to me was just amazing. And the whole thing of giving people, empowering people to make decisions, it really got my attention. And so I became interested in that. Of course, it's something that I studied when I was in school. I actually taught about organization development, but to actually see that in practice was just mind-blowing. And so with that, I was definitely sold on the prospect of workers having greater say or control over the workplace, which led me to co-ops. And it was my work with NOAA, in which I was working with the Economic Task Force at that time, looking for ways to bring about greater economic justice, that I had an opportunity and the pleasure of looking into co-ops and exploring that further. And so it led to eventually the creation, along with Rosemarie, when she came, we got together and we created the Southeast Center for Cooperative Development. So I didn't mean to take so much time, but I wanted to kind of explain that. And so that's why I'm here. And so I'll leave it to Rosemarie to introduce herself at this point.
Yeah, I love your story, Benny, because it's so unique that I don't know if any of you that are on the call now have, heard about self-directed work groups in a business. So it's such a unique experience. Yeah, I'm Rosemarie Rieger. I came to this work through a lot of, a lot of different routes, I guess. I started out in biotech as a researcher doing work on insulin and diabetes research. I went into teaching and taught Montessori 6 to 9 year olds in a multi-age classroom for several years. And all this time always on the side, kind of volunteering and doing work, community organizing. So I got into that work full time, working with a group called Jobs with Justice. And we did work around worker rights organizing, things like, better wages, helping workers get better wages, better benefits, the right to organize in their workplace. And did that work in Dallas, Texas. And then when we moved to Nashville a few years ago, I had heard about the work that Benny and others were doing around worker co-ops and really wanted to get involved because, with ever increasing inequality, I wanted to be a part of creating something different, a different kind of economy, and to close like the racial and gender wage and income gaps. And one way to do that is by expanding ownership and democracy in the economy. And that's exactly what worker cooperatives do. And it's when we as employees, right, as workers have a say about how the workplace is run, right? What we produce and how we make things and what we do with the profits. That's when we can make sure that the economy is working for everyone, right? When we have that kind of power, and it's not just a few people, right, that are benefiting off the economy. And so that is kind of my story of getting into this work. And I look forward to helping folks create worker cooperatives here in Nashville and Tennessee and in the Southeast. So today just to give you a brief overview, we would like to do introductions some more with you, and then we'll kind of look at an overview of the cooperative model, looking at the principles and values that these businesses are based on. Then we'll dive a little deeper into worker cooperatives, look at their benefits and structure among things. We'll talk about meeting our community's needs and if that can be done with cooperatives, and then think about some next steps that we can possibly do together. So I don't know why that is happening, but oops, sorry. It won't let me advance sometimes. So next we want to hear from you, and I think I'll stop the screen share so we can all see each other, but we'd like to hear from you. If you tell us your name, if you like your pronouns, if you have started a business or what you're interested in starting, any kind of business experience or work experience that you have that you'd like to share, and why you might be interested in starting a cooperative. So
I can start. Were you just
great.
gonna? Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, that would be great. Thanks, Mary.
Hi. Yeah. So yeah, my name is Maren Klostermeyer. I'm a student in the Masters of Education in Leadership in Organizational Performance program at Vanderbilt. I'm about to graduate, but my background is in like traditional benefits, human resources, and oh hey Taekwon, sorry, one of my classmates is on here. But moving forward, I'm looking into more like diversity and inclusion spaces, and like learning and development with really meaningful strategy behind it to create equitable workspaces, and to accomplish all of the things that have been mentioned already. So I'm not necessarily starting to or wanting to be an entrepreneur in this space, or at least not yet, but just like wanting to hear about what the thoughts are on this in this field is what brought me here today.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
I can go next. I'm Taekwon Morton, very similar to Marin. I am a Vanderbilt student, specifically in the Leadership and Organizational Performance program. I think I'm just very interested in just different ways that we can kind of push against the norm of how organizations are normally structured. I think we see a lot of these kind of like co-op types of frameworks in grassroots organizations, startups, social enterprises. But I think just kind of pushing the envelope and seeing if they can be adopted by larger scale organizations. And if that's the case, what are the costs? What are the benefits? But even if the whole entire structure can't be adopted, I'm sure there's different elements that can be incorporated. So excited to hear about that as well.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
I'll go. I'm Bernard Turner, and I teach social entrepreneurship at Belmont University. For some reason, I think I came to an event you all had, and so when I got it, I'm sorry, I had a 10-hour day, and I just rushed home so I can get on here. So, and I sent it to my students. I said, this is another form of entrepreneurship. I think you all should attend. So since you all did invite me, curiosity is while I'm here today. So I hope you don't mind me just being in here.
Welcome, Dr. Turner. It's good to have you again. Yeah, it's been a few years since we saw you. Yeah, it's so great to have you. Thank you.
I can go. My name is Dawn Harrington. She, her. I'm with Free Hearts, and I'm in Jackson, Tennessee. And we one of the co-op that we've been mostly working on together is a real estate co-op, and excited to learn more. And we have some other ideas within our base too, but we've been actively working in our community building cooperatives. Pretty much has been the priority to focus on the real estate co-op.
Yeah, great to have you here, Dawn. Always a pleasure to work with you and your group.
Thank you. Michelle and Dagan, y'all want to go?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, I'm Dagan, she, her pronouns. I'm in Carroll County, Tennessee. I'm also a fellow with Free Hearts, and I've always loved the idea of self-sufficiency. And so the idea of a cooperative, I
Hello, I'm Michelle. I'm also with Free Heart. I'm already a real estate investor with rental properties. So in working with Free Hearts and a real estate cooperative, I really want to learn to see if there's some way that I can utilize what talents that and knowledge that I have and be able to help with a cooperative.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Maxine, I use she, their pronouns. And I'm particularly interested in learning more about like a cooperative, like a worker co-op structure, and thinking about like what all that entails and like how it generally works. I'm also particularly interested in like other forms of like how workers kind of come together and are really still able to make these kind of collective decisions, and have this and like be able to like function in this way as like a unit.
Great, welcome, Maxine. Great to have you. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for sharing that with us. This is exciting to see from all the different angles you're thinking about this. So this will be great. So I'll go back to sharing. My screen. I don't know why it does that. Sorry. And I will hand it over to Benny.
Okay, and if anytime you have any questions, just you can raise your hand. I think we'll see it, or put it in chat. But feel free to stop me at any time. And this is basically just what we're going to give is an overview of worker cooperative and cooperatives in general. We will teach a more intense cooperative class called Co-op Academy. It's a 10-week class, 2 hours a week, which we really get into the nuts and bolts of cooperatives. But now we just want to give you a basic overview. So in a nutshell, what is a co-op? Well, at the core is democracy.
Sorry, Benny, I know there's some background noise.
Yeah.
Could folks mute themselves?
That may be from let me try to, just a minute. Is that better? Same. Is that better?
Yeah, it's quiet now. Thanks.
Okay. Again, what is a co-op? In a nutshell, I was saying the co-ops are basically, at the core of co-ops is democracy. They are democratically owned. That means in a worker co-op, the workers are the owners of the business. They are democratically controlled. That means that the worker owners each have a voice, have a say-so in the operations of the business, in the governance of the business. Each person has a vote, and they're democratically benefited. And what this means is that they provide benefit to the co-op members. Actually, co-ops are founded based on a recognized need that the founders feel that's not being met adequately otherwise. And so it is benefiting to those members who choose to form the co-op. That's the primary purpose for the co-op. Okay, next. Look at some of the principles of the co-op. That's one of the things that distinguishes co-ops from the more conventional business, is the fact that it is founded on a set of principles, 7 principles. There are some co-ops that actually have 10 principles, but for the most co-ops that I'm familiar with, we have 7 key principles. It's voluntary and open membership. And what this means is that the worker has a choice as whether or not to join the co-op. Membership is strictly voluntary. And it's open in the sense that it's non-discriminatory. It's open to all. As long as you feel that you can, are willing to accept the responsibilities of ownership and the duties of being a worker owner, then you can become a member. Second principle is democratic member control. Again, at the core of co-ops is democracy. The member owners are the one who establish the governance, the policies and the processes by which the co-op is controlled and operated. The third principle is economic participation. And what this means is that each member has a ownership stake and they have a capital investment in the co-op. Autonomy and independence is number 4. And what this refers to is the fact that co-ops are self-governing. And if you enter into an agreement with some other entities or other groups, then it must be so that the co-op maintains its independence. It must never surrender its control to any outside factors. Number 5 is the principle of education, training, and information. In co-ops, they are committed to providing ongoing education and training opportunities. After all, the members are the owners and they're making ownership decisions. So the quality of the business, the viability and the longevity of the business is quite dependent on the education and training of the members. And so there is a deep commitment to ongoing training and education because this is what allows for ongoing continuous improvement. And then information sharing. In co-ops, the owners got to have the information available so that they can make sound decisions. Principle number 6 is cooperation among cooperatives. Co-ops live by, I guess, a different perspective is that we don't seek to compete against each other, against other cooperatives. We look for ways in which we can enhance each other and work together to help improve the entire co-op community. And number 7 is concern for community. In some of your more typical businesses, you see this, I guess, is over, I guess, focus on profits and profit maximization, which is part of the reasons why we have, I guess, some of the income inequality that we see today, low wage employment that we see today, and some of the other instances where profits takes precedence and takes priority over people and even over planet. But with co-ops, we balance the concern for profits because there's still concerns for making profits with co-ops. A co-op must be profitable if it's to be viable, but profits are not the primary concern. Labor and people do not become subordinate to profit. So you try to balance those concerns of profits with concerns for people and with concerns for community. These are some of the founding principles of the co-ops. And the principle rests on the values that we have here, the values of self-help, self-responsibility, again, democracy, equality, because everyone in a co-op are peers, you're equals. You don't have the hierarchy of what tends to be a rather autocratic or authoritarian sense of command control that you have in some of the more conventional businesses. Equality is important. Equity, meaning fairness. Solidarity, that's the unity of working together. The value of honesty, being honest and trustworthy. Openness, and openly sharing, communicating. Social responsibility in caring for others. These are the values and the principles that make co-ops quite unique.
Yes, and now we'd like to talk a bit about the different types of cooperatives. There are actually over 40,000 co-ops in the US, and together they create about 2 million jobs and 75 billion in wages and benefit, and more than 514 billion in total revenue. And you might actually be a co-op member. So most of the co-ops are consumer co-ops, and that would include credit unions and electricity, like utility co-ops. They make up the majority of cooperatives in the US, with about 92% of all cooperatives. And so these consumer co-ops are owned by the people who consume, who buy the goods or use the services. We also have another type called producer co-ops, and producer cooperatives are, for example, producers like farmers who come together, band together, and market their products together. And we'll talk about some examples in the next slide. Another type, although not very many, are purchasing cooperatives. These make up about 2% of all cooperatives, and these can be independent small businesses that pool their resources in order to be competitive with larger chains. And in the photo there, you see Ace Hardware. That's an example of a purchasing cooperative. And then the smallest section of the cooperatives are worker co-ops, making up about 1%. And it's a growing sector, and but it still is the smallest one among the different types of cooperatives. And here in this slide, we just wanted to show you that cooperatives or co-ops for short, right, provide many goods and services. You can find co-ops in pretty much any sector in the economy. We talked about financial cooperatives, right? Credit unions. Here's an example from Nashville. Cornerstone Financial Cooperative is an example for that. We have businesses like Equal Exchange, which is actually a worker cooperative that sources coffee and chocolate and other goods from producer cooperatives, from farmers who have come together as a co-op to market their products together. And so Equal Exchange actually buys their coffee and chocolate from growers around the world, they sell those and are owned by the workers. Another co-op that you might know in the retail sector is REI. They've been in the news lately. They're a consumer cooperative. So if you could become a member as a consumer, buy a membership, and you then get a discount every year based on the quantity and the amount that you buy at REI. They sell like camping equipment, recreational equipment, and just on a sidebar there, are actually, unfortunately, very forthcoming about supporting that. We have a co-op like Ocean Spray. It's a producer cooperative. Again, here, farmers like cranberry farmers have come together. They own distributing and processing facilities and market their products under a shared name and as Ocean Spray. And so to make it more beneficial for themselves, right, they've come together to form this like company together as a producer cooperative. They're still independent farmers, but together they own Ocean Spray. Similar with Ace Hardware and Cabot. You might know Cabot cheese and milk, dairy farmers who have come together as a producer cooperative to market their products together. And so now we'd like to talk a little bit more about a specific type of cooperative, namely the worker cooperatives. But before we jump into that, does anyone have any questions? All right, if not, oops, sorry, jumped.
Okay, let's explore just what is a worker cooperative. Because worker cooperatives is basically essentially the focus of the Southeast Center, although we also are expanding into real estate cooperatives, housing cooperatives, dealing with the need for affordable housing. But worker cooperative is our primary focus. So what is a worker cooperative? Contrary to some beliefs, worker cooperatives are for-profit businesses. I don't know where the notion that co-ops are nonprofit, I don't know where it came from, but yes, worker cooperatives are for-profit businesses. And it says here with one or more member classes. Generally, if it has different member classes, it's typically voting and non-voting. Our workers are willing to accept the responsibility of membership, are welcome. Again, that goes back to open membership. And workers share in the earnings and losses of the business. And if they share it on the basis of what we call patronage. In co-ops, we don't typically call profits or profit. You don't typically call them profit. They typically call surplus. And the surplus is allocated to the workers on the basis of patronage, which is typically set on the basis of work hours. So meaning that the more hours you work, the larger the patronage you get. Again, it's the worker owners who have the decision-making power of the co-op. So ownership and control is in the hands of the worker members. For the larger co-ops, and someone had asked about the scalability of co-ops, there are some very large co-ops. As a matter of fact, Mondragon is one of the largest co-op networks in the world. Has, oh God, thousands of workers. But worker members of the larger co-op elect the board of directors, and they elect them on a one worker, one vote basis. And again, that's consistent with the co-op principle of equality and equal voice. Decisions about what happens to the capital of the co-op are made by the worker owners equally.
Yeah, so again, what's the difference to a conventional business and a worker co-op? Well, in the top part of the graph, you can see a conventional corporation, and it's here the control is based on the amount of capital that individuals have invested in the firm. And so the more you invest, right, the more shares you buy, the more control you have based on your investment. And in a worker co-op model, it's very different, right? There, the control is based on working at the firm, and everyone's capital contribution is equal. All the workers own the majority of the equity in the business and control the voting shares. So that's really important that that it's the workers who own it equally, right? No outside investors or anything like that. And one worker, one vote, that's the guiding democratic principle that is used for decision-making at a worker cooperative. And we'll talk some more about this, but these are just kind of the big differences between a conventional business and a cooperative, a worker cooperative. So now I'd like to share with you some numbers about worker co-ops, just to give you an idea. And these numbers, I believe, were from a survey from 2019, so they're kind of dated, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics does not collect data on worker cooperatives. So this is data that the US Federation of Worker Cooperatives has sourced through kind of self-reporting. And so there are more than 465 worker co-ops, but these are the ones we know about who took part in this survey from 2019. And at the time, there were about 6,454 workers that worked at these cooperatives, and they generated about 505 million in revenue. What's interesting about worker cooperatives and why we like to work with this model is that 59% of worker co-ops are owned by minorities, and about 62% are owned by women. And so this is, the population that has traditionally been left out of the economy and out of entrepreneurship. And that is one of the reasons why we look to this model to expand entrepreneurship to our target populations, to the folks who've historically been left out. And so this is a good model for that reason. And there are also some other benefits to worker cooperatives that we'll talk about now.
Among the benefits that you can find in workers' co-ops, of course, is wages. And here we're talking about wages, not just the hourly wage, but the patronage that you receive as well. The patronage is the participation in the profit and losses of the operations. And here we see that the average wage for the entry level was $19.67 per hour for the co-op. That's $7 higher than the minimum wage in 13 states. $12 higher than the minimum wage here in Tennessee. Workers also participate in patronage. We've said a bit about patronage. And this is the surplus of the operations. At this point of time that this survey was done, the average patronage per year per worker was about $8,200. Another one of the benefits is the pay ratio. And one of the reasons why I found co-ops so attractive was the need to address the inequality issues we have here in the US. Income inequality as well as wealth inequality. And I felt that co-ops are uniquely designed and crafted to better address this problem. One is due to the principle of pay. Here we see the average pay ratio in the co-op of 2 to 1. That's the ratio between the highest paid and lowest paid worker. You know, typically here in the US, in our more conventional businesses, when you look at the ratio of CEO pay to workers' pay, it's over 300 to 1 ratio. Now, back in the early 70s, that ratio was more like 20 to 1. But we see how the CEO pay has just skyrocketed over the past few decades, while the workers' pay has basically remained somewhat stable. And so that ratio is outrageous, absurd, over 300 to 1. So worker co-ops is a way of addressing the inequality issue. And let me say this, one of the reasons why that is important, particularly when you look at the Black community, you see the wealth inequality, not just income inequality, but wealth inequality. You know, there was a study done a few years back that looked at the intractable problem of the wealth gap between the races. And it said that it would take about 225 years for the wealth of the average Black household to equal that of the average white household today. Which tells me if we continue to do what we're doing, that gap will never close. So, and that's one of the other reasons why I feel so attracted toward co-ops in that model. Is a means of addressing the inequality problem, which is sizable. Another benefit of co-ops is the stability and the viability of the cooperative business. Compared to the more conventional businesses, businesses that are 6 to 10 years old, conventional businesses, small businesses has about an 18.7% success rate. For co-ops, that's 25.6%. For those businesses over 26 years old, conventional businesses, success rate is about 11.9%. for co-ops of the same period, the success rate is greater at 14.7%. And I'll say something about that as well, because it's just my theory. But I think the part of the reason for that greater success is that when you got people involved in the performance of an operation or performance of a business, you have a greater sense of commitment. And it's that commitment that makes the difference in performance. You know, because you're not just complying or it's something that you have a stake in. You know, when you have skin in the game, you tend to have a greater commitment. And that's something I noticed with just working with self-directed work groups. When people have a voice, they feel like they've got more at stake. And I think that's one of the reasons why co-ops tend to do better than your more conventional businesses. Benefits of working on cooperative. It says you have control over the way work is organized, performed, and managed. You have a voice. You know, in co-op, people are treated like people. They're treated like people who are valued and are appreciated. And that's a great benefit. Have greater employment security. And a co-op tends to be more community-based as well, because a co-op that is rooted in the community, because you have owners who live in the community, and you're not apt to pick up and move to some other location in search of greener pastures. People have a financial and ownership stake in business. You have an opportunity to create wealth by having an ownership stake in the business. You know, again, I would mention the Black community, because for the Black community, the greatest wealth building asset we have is home ownership. And with the housing crisis back in 2008, a lot of the wealth that the Black community had was just decimated. Co-ops provide an opportunity to have another wealth creating asset, which is the business. So that ownership stake is a means to create wealth. An opportunity to practice democracy. You know, we pride ourselves in this country as being the model of democracy, but the truth is democracy is very limited here. You know, we vote in some of the elections, but on a day-to-day basis, particularly in the workplace, what we see, what we experience is not democracy. It's more autocracy or something more authoritarian. But co-op gives us a chance to practice democracy at work on a day-to-day basis. And that has spillover benefits even for the community, because people tend to be more civic-minded once you start to sip from the cup of democracy. Another benefit is increased local spending. Again, the social benefits and voting levels. I think there's been a correlation between the increase in voting levels for people who are members of cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives. Any questions, comments?
I find it really interesting that there's like this correlation between like being like worker-owned cooperatives, like from what you were talking about, and I guess maybe what I'm trying to say is a bit redundant, but like this like increased like participation in like just other community like aspects. Like I think that's really cool to notice that and to like think about that, because like you're right, there's like a lot of times, and I've been in workplaces where it's very much, you know, I've been kind of, you know, like, well, we as workers should be able to like have more control, and then it's been kind of pushed down. It's like, this is not a democratic organization, this is authoritarian. And it's is weird to also kind of accept that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. My work with the union, I would say that one of the things we try to do was create a balance of power. And that's what's evident in a lot of these companies, especially ones who aren't even unionized. You have an imbalance of power where labor is basically seen, or workers are seen as subordinate to the concerns of capital, of the concerns of and that spells profit maximization. The concerns of profits take precedence over the concerns of people. So, and that subordination of labor, it has an effect on people. It really does. In a co-op, people feel empowered. And I say not just co-ops, but even with the self-directed work groups, what I experienced was that people felt empowered. They felt like their voice mattered. And so they were more willing to be involved, more willing to take an active role at work, and from all indications that has spillover benefits into the community. So I think we'd have a better society, basically, if we had more democratic experiences that people know that they matter.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Maxine. Because work is probably the most undemocratic sphere in our life, right? So we don't have much say there usually, and or very limited. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That is like one of the big differences. If we now compare the structure of a conventional business with a worker cooperative, right? The main difference, like we said, is that the employees in a worker cooperative own and manage the business. And in the top graph, it's a conventional or privately held company. And in a company like this, generally, there's this close-knit group of founders or owners who own the majority of the stock in a traditional company. And they serve on the board and elect the board of directors. And they oftentimes serve as the company's executive team. And this core group oftentimes maintains control over the company. And it also, sometimes a business can also have outside shareholders. They could be, other family members who invest, or professional investors like venture capitalists. But sometimes these people, don't really influence the day-to-day management of the company, but they do influence the major corporate decisions that are made, such as whether the company will go public or sell to a competitor or to some other buyer. And so the shareholders elect the board of directors, who oversee the management, and the management oversees the employees, right, in a conventional business. But in a worker cooperative, on the bottom graph, as you can see, there's a fundamentally different structure because it's owned and controlled by the workers. So the shares are not held now by some select group of managers or supervisors or investors, but all the workers who have met certain eligibility requirements or criteria, and each cooperative sets those up themselves. It's a very like Benny already mentioned, it's a very fluid, a very flexible structure. And so the worker owners decide on that. And the worker owners, like we already said, on a one member, one worker, one vote basis, they elect the board, who oversees the management of the company, who in turn oversees the worker owners. And as a result, in contrast to the above, right, the conventional or traditional firm, the worker co-op model has this accountability loop that starts and ends with the worker owners, right? So that's what this bottom graph is trying to show, that the worker owners are the ones, right, who elect the board of directors, or their different structures they can take. Sometimes in small cooperatives, all of the worker owners are on the board, and the board oversees management, right, which is accountable, which oversees the worker owners, but is also accountable to the worker owners, right, because they ultimately make those decisions about who to hire as management. Some worker cooperatives actually don't want the managers per se to be worker owners. They find that a conflict. And so sometimes management is even outside of worker ownership. So democratic self-management, right, is this very unique aspect of worker cooperatives. And Benny will tell us some more about democratic decision-making and what that can look like in a co-op.
Excuse me, I see Maxine has her hand up. Maxine, you go ahead.
Yes, I had a question. So it was basically like around management, and I was wondering if you know if there's any instances in which, because like I know you said like for like lots of places, co-worker co-ops, that management can't necessarily be worker owners because it's a conflict of interest. Whereas are there any points in which management like transitions into like having like ownership at all?
Yeah, certainly. And, you know, management is oftentimes looked as a role, right? It's not necessarily like a position, but a role. And those roles can cycle through, you know, in a lot of worker co-ops. All the worker owners that are interested in taking on new responsibilities or learning new tasks, new roles, are encouraged to do that, because in order to manage a business well, it's good if all the worker owners, you know, understand the financial aspects, understand all the processes that are needed to produce their products, or you know, make their services available. So yeah, so that's really encouraged, that the worker owners know a lot about all aspects, and can take on, you know, any role, and then also cycle off and let others, you know, learn that and take on those different roles.
Yeah, and let me add that in worker co-ops, it all depends on what the workers decide and choose to do, because you can structure it in many different ways. But with a more egalitarian structure, like Rosemary said, the management role isn't so much a title, but it's just a set of responsibilities that basically anyone could take on if you are knowledgeable about what's needed. And I think what, I guess we kind of get locked into the concept of management through this vertical picture of the hierarchy, in which commands and orders are communicated from the top down, and reports and requests are communicated from the bottom up. But in a more egalitarian structure that tends to be flatter, the communication emphasis is more on collaborating, or sharing information, or working on decisions, or making joint decisions. So the communication emphasis, if the co-op so chooses to structure it that way, it could be more horizontal rather than vertical.
Mm.
And so this thing of management doesn't really become an issue.
Okay. And I think from like what y'all were saying, what I've also like, I guess I'm seeing, it's like for worker owners, management is also like a small part of like the overall of all the workers. And so depending on the context and like how everyone wants to structure everything, there couldn't necessarily even really truly be like the fear of management, like in like a hierarchical kind of like structure, just overtaking everything. It's one worker, one vote. And so, management is still a small part. So management could still have their own vote, but necessarily they don't control everything. It's still a democratic process in that we all got one vote. So best of luck, sis. So this is how we think as a collective it needs to be done.
Yeah. And again, it's all up to the individual co-op you can structure it as, as best suits the members. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And yeah, the saying is, if you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op, and because they're just so different, and that people do take advantage of the flexibility, and and it takes time, right, to figure out like what's the best structure, but co-ops tend to be really creative and seek out what works best for them, and how to structure management, and is it done in committees, and there's a bakery cooperative that we know of, and they're, the decisions, whatever, the bakers make the decisions about what flour to buy, and what pans to use, and the people in the front and the storefront, they make the decisions about, what bags to put it in or what. So they kind of split up, right? Who's there, who's, who makes the decisions are the people who are involved with that part of the process. And so you can get really creative. Oh, sorry, lag.
Okay, and here we're just looking at the different various forms of democratic decision-making. Again, there's a wide variety. This is just a few. Here we have majority. I think this is one that most people are familiar with. Majority vote, whereas is 50% plus one is the majority. And there's also the supermajority. This is where you want there to be such a sufficient number that is pretty clear, clearly the choice. The thing about majority is that it tends to create winners and losers. And dependent upon the decision or the topic that's being considered, it could be detrimental. We also have multi-voting. A form of that is what's called the nominal group technique. And this is where you take, I guess, an iteration of votes, where you narrow down the options or the alternative solutions. You could start off with a bunch, say that everyone has a voice, everyone suggests a particular solution or course of action, and you may end up with, say, 10. And so you vote on the issues that you want or the solution you want. You may come up and decide to, okay, let's look at the top 5. And then you vote again on those top 5 of those top 5, which one would you choose? And eventually you come to a solution, but that's multi-voting or nominal group technique. And then here at the bottom left is a more representative type democracy, where you choose representatives or delegates who make the decisions that they then hand back to the membership. And then you have consent. And then consensus, of course. Consensus is, I guess that's my preferred way, but the thing about consensus, sometimes it can take quite a bit of time to reach consensus. And so, in not every situation where you have that luxury of taking the time to reach a consensus. What we did in the situation, again, I'm going back to my experience years ago with the work groups, is that, of course, they operated by consensus, but for decisions in which they couldn't make a decision, they couldn't reach a consensus, we had what we call an oversight committee of, say, about 5 people who were chosen by the group, and they had the authority to, in situations where a consensus couldn't be reached, they had the authority to make the decision. And they did it by majority vote. Typically, what would happen when the general body couldn't reach a consensus, they will kick it up to the oversight committee. Oversight committee may look at it and try to identify the issues that were perhaps standing in the way and make some recommendations and send it back to the general body, so that, because we didn't want them giving up their power to make decisions. But in the event that something had to be decided pretty quickly, when you couldn't reach a consensus, then it went up to the oversight committee and they were able to choose. But these are some of the methods of exercising democracy at work. And co-ops choose the ones that fits the particular situation or fit their disposition, and choose what's comfortable for them. Again, majority vote is something that is more, I guess it's what we tend to think of when we think of democracy. But when you, at a workplace, it could create problems, because it could create a situation where you have losers that will perhaps harbor some resentment toward the decision that was made. So when possible, I will always say that try to get something that's more consensual, but not all the time when you have that luxury. And I've probably talked too long, so we can move on. What we would like for you to do now is consider some of the needs that you may have or that you see evident in your community. Some needs that perhaps are not being met to your satisfaction, or some needs that you felt could be better met. And then think about some of these and think about, could perhaps a cooperative help better meet those needs? Now open the floor up to the audience.
Hey, I can jump in here. So, one of the things that a couple of things that we decided, well, like I said, we're working on a real estate cooperative because it's a huge need. A lot of our folks, because of our backgrounds, are being denied housing, and we have also people that are being kicked out. Like landlords that are stopping taking Section 8 and then like kind of banding together, and all of them are not taking Section 8 in certain counties. And so it's like nowhere that people can use their vouchers, and a lot of people are just getting denied, period, because of having a background. And so definitely housing is one of our biggest needs. And I'll just make this one as well, because the youth were in our organization were talking about some of the issues that they we're seeing and experiencing, and some of the solutions. And they want to do a tutoring co-op as well, because some were doing good in school and some were not doing good in school. So just trying to figure out how, because that also has, impacts in the future too, if they get too far behind. And so that was something that they determined. So those are two needs, like tutoring and real estate housing.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Yeah, excellent. Because those are real community needs where co-ops can make a difference. I know that in, particularly in housing and real estate co-ops can provide a stabilizing force in the housing market, and that will maintain affordability for housing by having it managed and controlled cooperatively. So, anyone else recognize any needs that you or your community may have, either as say a resident of the community or as a consumer?
I think a very obvious one for me is like around food. So, I mean, I could maybe perhaps like, community gardens turning into like also just being like co-ops. So, where the folks in the neighborhood are gardening, and everybody has like their own ownership of the garden, and then they're all also like making the profit from that. It's, I don't know, kind of like making the farmers market like even more of like a special time, because then you could have multiple cooperatives like making up the farmers market, kind of like that.
Yeah, good idea. I was trying to think, I know there is a co-op in Cincinnati. I don't know whether it's actually farming, because it's in Cincinnati. I don't know whether it's farming or gardening or what. But that sounds like something that you are talking about there. This is a good idea. Anyone else have any ideas about the needs that you recognize in your community, or needs that you may have noticed yourself individually that maybe some other folks would share?
I have another one, but I don't know if other folks have one. I'll wait a moment.
Yeah, feel free to go ahead.
I was thinking about, I don't know. I think I was thinking about a couple of different things. I think one of them feels kind of random, but I don't know, my mind was instantly for some reason transported to like the Jiffy Lube down the street from me in my neighborhood. And I was thinking, of like mechanics, like if they had their own co-op, for one thing. And I was thinking about maybe like if, I don't know, maybe like nurses, like nurses, especially like folks like that like have that kind of knowledge in their own communities. And like they have their own kind of co-op, and they basically like help look out for the community, and everybody kind of like pays into like making sure that like that co-op is stable, so that everyone has like their own like every community, like the community would have its own like share of like a medical resource. And I don't know. I was thinking like, maybe like a painters co-op, something like that. Or maybe like, because like one idea that I've always like had has been around like, like having like kind of like, not like warehouse space, but one of those like kind of community spaces. And so maybe kind of, maybe having like, I don't know, it's not necessarily like a coffee shop, but it's like some kind of like relaxation place where people can like have like something to eat, but then it's also owned by all the workers. And it's like a community spot.
great.
Oh, those are some great ideas. Yeah. And all things are community needs, right? Like, yeah, a co-op could, yeah, be in any sector. So those are great ideas, Maxine. We're actually working with a group. You mentioned painters. We're working with the group who would like to start a painters co-op.
Yeah, I see where Don entered daycare and elderly care. Yeah, it's great choices for co-ops.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing all those ideas. And yeah, co-ops are started right to meet the needs of the community, meet the needs of the workers, right, for good jobs. I know Maxine mentioned, some jobs like the Jiffy Lube, the mechanics who often have crappy jobs, right? But as a co-op, if they can figure out how to organize their own workplace, organize the work, and of course, it has to be a sustainable, profitable business, right? But a co-op can't make a business that isn't, working well financially. It can't change that in most cases, right? So so that's one thing we'll work with you if you start a co-op and work with us, is to really work on the financial stability. Yeah, that's a way to create good jobs. And so in this slide, I just wanted to share with you some examples of co-ops around the US, and point out like why they were started and what needs they're meeting in their communities. And so at the top, you see on the top left-hand corner is Namaste Solar. This was actually a traditional business that was converted to worker ownership, to employee ownership. And they're now 120 worker owners. And they have a 1-year candidacy period. So you're hired on as an employee. And after 1 year, you can apply to become a member, a worker owner. And the other worker owners then decide and vote on if you're a good fit. It's a $5,000 buy-in share. So to become worker owner, your share for your vote, right, and for ownership is $5,000. Usually that can be paid off over time. So it's a lot of co-ops don't have like a lump sum up front, but you can pay that off through like payroll deduction over time. And since Benny mentioned the compensation ratios, right, at Namaste Solar, it's 1:6. So the greatest difference between the highest and lowest paid worker at Namaste Solar is 1:6, which is very low compared to like 1:3 over 300, right? Or I think in the financial sectors, it's often like 1 to 1,000, where the difference between the highest and the lowest paid workers is 1,000-fold. Over to the right, we have opportunity threads. This is a cut and sew worker-owned textile plant in North Carolina, and this was formed in 2008 after many jobs were leaving, in the textile industry, many jobs were being outsourced overseas. And so this region of North Carolina lost a lot of jobs, and whole communities were just unraveling. And the jobs that remained were low-wage jobs. They were inconsistent and had unpredictable hours. Wage theft was happening all the time. And a majority of the textile workers in this area of North Carolina were actually Mayan immigrants who had left Guatemala during the Civil War there. And so they got together with some folks and started a sewing, a cut and sew cooperative together. There are about 23 worker owners there right now, and they're mainly Mayan of Mayan descent. And so that's, you know, a way that co-ops can meet the needs, right? By they created a whole new sector. It's actually quite thriving, and it has attracted a lot of other textile industry to this area of North Carolina. So it started with one co-op, and it's now created like this whole ecosystem around it. To the left of that, you see Aorta. This is an anti-oppression resource cooperative. And this cooperative was made up of workers who were all had like their individual company, their individual LLCs. They had to fend for themselves in the gig economy. They were offering like trainings around strategic planning and you know, workshops, how to facilitate consulting services, but they could only take on like small jobs, right, each individually. But coming together, they were able to share back office services, share space. They could broaden their client base, take on, you know, bigger projects together, help each other out, like so everyone could take a vacation or sick leave. They could mentor each other. And so all of these things they couldn't do, right, individually, but coming together as a cooperative, they're, you know, they've become really successful, and it's helped each one now to start this business together. Underneath that, you'll see Black Star Co-op. This is actually a brewery and restaurant co-op that is interestingly, it's a hybrid. So it's owned by the community, about 3,000 consumer members, and some of those are shown in the photo there, and 27 workers, and 8 of them are worker owners. So there are 3,000 consumer owners and 18 worker owners that own and run Black Star Co-op, a brewery together in Austin, Texas. So we talked about the model being quite flexible, and you can do things like hybrid or multi-stakeholder cooperatives also. And to the right of Black Star, we see some member owners of cooperative home care associates, and Maxine already pointed out how you know, nurses and people in healthcare and medical care could possibly form a co-op. And CHCA is actually the largest worker co-op in the US. There are about, there are over 2,000 workers at CHCA. They're located in the Bronx, and about 1,000 of those are worker owners. They started out in 1992 with just 12 worker owners, and now you know, they have over 2,000 employees, and 1,000 of those are worker owners. What's interesting too is that nearly all of the worker owners are Latina or African American women. They get free job training. It's also a union cooperative. That means that these workers are members of the Service Employees Union 1199, and the union has helped give them an extra layer of democracy, right? An extra a committee that listens to worker grievances. So it helps expand, you know, the workers' voice in the co-op. What's interesting too about CHCA is that through expanding their training and better wages, they've actually impacted the whole home care industry around New York City. And so by raising, raising the wage level and offering education, it's put pressure on other competitors in that industry, and they've also had to, to raise the bar for everyone. And so that's kind of a cool example to show like how much pressure, worker co-ops can make in certain industries and change that they can bring about. So next, we'd just like to touch on kind of we're almost at time. So the development stages of a co-op are pretty much like any small business. You want to do some research, right, to develop your idea. And one of the first things is to find others who are passionate about the same business idea that you have. That's really important. You can't be a co-op on your own, right? So finding folks, 2 or 3 others for the start is great. And so in the next stage, besides recruiting others, you'll start thinking about like how you're going to make decisions, right? Start planning your business after you've looked at feasibility and your market study, right? Look at your competitors, will this business be feasible? In stage 3, you'll start to develop your structure some more and look at marketing, open up a bank account and those good things. And then in stage 4, it's about launching the business, setting up your marketing campaign, training your members, setting up a back office. So I know that was really quick in a nutshell, but we just wanted to emphasize too that what's the most important thing at the beginning is really to find others who share your passion about the business that you'd like to start. Oops, it always has a lag. Sorry about that. And we'll just go, Benny will talk real quickly about who we are and the kind of work we do. Oh, sorry, you're muted, Benny, sorry.
I'll just say real quickly that we are a 501c3 public charity nonprofit. Our mission is to address the inequalities, to increase economic opportunities and benefits, particularly for those who have been marginalized and excluded. We give priority to the developing and empowering capacity of low-income, minority, and underserved areas of Nashville and beyond. And our vision is the elimination of these disparities between the races, between communities, in employment, in wealth, and income, because we're trying to build an economy that sustains community and earth, one that's fair and just for all. And go to the next one. This is the type of support we provide: technical assistance, funding and financing support for the employee-owned co-ops. Of course, education to promote the economic development that we need. The co-op network that provides support for us, and also support for conversions to employee ownership as part of a business succession plan.
Yeah, and we wanted to highlight some of the co-ops that are already developing in and around Nashville and across Tennessee that we're really excited about. So we have Voces de Nashville up in the top left. This is 6, mainly almost all of them are immigrant women who are using their native Spanish language skills to train other folks in Spanish. And so they're a worker co-op just just started up about 6 months ago, and they teach classes. They teach teachers at Nashville Public Schools, for instance, to help them brush up on their Spanish so they can talk to the parents. Then we have Next Gen Co-op. This is an IT co-op. They do website development and all sorts of good stuff, and they're located out in Dyersburg in West Tennessee. Over in East Tennessee in Johnson City, we have Atlas Books. It's a pop-up shop bookstore. They hope to have a brick and mortar store soon, a worker cooperative. You can buy their books online at bookshop.org. Yeah, they're just developing, hoping to have a store this year. At the bottom, we have Music City Child Care Collective. It's an up-and-coming child care that focuses on micro centers, and that is owned and controlled by mainly African-American women who live in North Nashville. And so that's in the process of developing. We also have Lulu's. It's an organic bakery out in Memphis, and they do pop-up shops right now, also looking for a permanent space, but they're selling out of their organic and vegan products almost every week. And in the bottom left-hand corner, we have Nashville Foodscapes. This is a conversion. It's a landscaping company that focuses on edible landscapes. So they mainly plant plants that that birds and animals and humans can eat. So you don't just have a lawn, but you actually have a beautiful landscape that creates food for others. And this is just to give you an idea of some of the cooperatives that have developed here in Nashville, plus another one that Benny will talk about.
Yeah, we want to introduce our fund, the Net Fund. That's a loan fund that was created in a partnership between Free Hearts, which Don is the director of, and the Southeast Center. And what's unique about this loan fund, is a fund to create cooperatives, is that it's non-extractive, meaning that a lot of the people that we are targeting to focus are those who are marginalized, may not have strong credit ratings, or may not have money saved for equity investment. So this is non-extractive, meaning that you don't have to pledge securities to support the financing. You don't have to make any type of personal guarantees on the loan. It's non-extractive in the sense that it would take nothing from the individual or the community. It would only be repaid out of profits, which is why our service is so important, because we are there to ensure that the business is absolutely viable and will succeed. This is part of the Seed Commons national network. And that fund with Seed Commons actually has a 98% success rate. So this approach has been very successful. One of the companies that we were able to assist in launching was a trucking company that owned by African Americans, most who were formerly incarcerated, and involves men and women, but a trucking company that we are really excited about. And I think they hit at the right time. But this is the New Economy of Tennessee Fund.
Great, and I know we're over time, but if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. So in terms of, next steps, we'd like to encourage you to stay in touch, visit our website if you'd like. We have a Facebook page. We are doing an intensive training in the fall, and we invite you to be a part of that. But bring, at least one other partner to this. And this course will really give you everything you need, from developing your mission statement to your business model canvas to, putting together some startup financial projections, all of that, to help you really build a good foundation to launch your cooperative. And, spread the word about this model. It's been around for a long time, but, a lot of people don't know about it. So help us spread the word, and we'll be sending you an email with the recording and the slides, if you like, some additional materials that you can read. And yeah, please, contact us with any questions you have, and we can hang around a bit if you'd like to stay on, if you have other questions. But we do thank you for being a part of this, and we hope to stay in contact with you.
And I ask you to please help spread the word. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. All right, Benny, good job.
Yeah, thank you, Rosemary. It went well.
Yeah. Yeah, we had 2 more people jump on that didn't get to introduce themselves, and Arthur Butler and a Dana Dunwald, I think was her name.
Okay.
So we should have their email addresses,
okay.
and
Okay.
I guess we'll send out the recording. Oh, sorry. I should stop that.